You need to sign this, Maggie. My daughter-in-law pushed a stack of papers across my dining room table and placed a pen beside them. Rachel did not sit down. She stood across from me with her arms folded, looking like the decision had already been made and my signature was just a formality. My son Daniel sat beside her. He would not look at me. Robert's brother Frank was at the other end of the table, and my sister-in-law Carol sat near the window. Nobody said a word. I looked down at the first page, then back at Rachel. What exactly am I signing? I asked. You are agreeing not to interfere with Daniel's inheritance anymore. Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. Impatience. Maybe even confidence. Interfere how? Maggie, please. We have been through this. Then explaining it one more time should be easy. Rachel let out a slow breath. Robert was Daniel's father. There is a trust. There is property. There are investments. Daniel has rights, and you keep acting like everything has to go through you. I looked at Daniel. Is that what you think? He rubbed his hands together. Mom, I just want this settled. Rachel immediately stepped in. We both do. That word caught my attention. We. It had been appearing more and more lately. Daniel's inheritance had become their inheritance. His questions had become their questions. And now his rights had become something Rachel was trying to put in writing. Who prepared this? I asked. Someone helped us. A lawyer. Rachel's expression tightened. Someone who understands these things. Frank shifted in his chair. Carol looked down at the table. I picked up the first page and read a few lines. It sounded official. There were references to inheritance rights, family assets, and my supposed agreement not to interfere with property that should pass to Daniel. I put the page back down. I am not signing this tonight. Rachel stared at me. Why not? Because I do not sign legal documents at my dining room table because somebody tells me to. Somebody, she said. I am your daughter-in-law. Then you should have no problem with me having it reviewed. Her jaw tightened. You are stalling. I am being careful. You have been careful for 8 months. 8 months. That was how long Robert had been gone. My husband of 39 years. The man whose coffee mug was still in the cabinet because I could not bring myself to move it. His old jacket still hung by the garage door. His reading glasses were still on the small table beside his chair. I was still learning how to live in a house that felt like he might walk back into it at any moment, and Rachel was standing in that house telling me I was the problem. If stories about families, trust, and the boundaries people cross when money gets involved speak to you, subscribe and stay with me, because what happened next changed the way I saw my own family. She slid the pen closer. Just sign it. I pushed it back. No. For the first time that evening, her calm expression slipped. Fine. Have someone look at it. But this is not going away. She reached into her tote bag, pulled out another set of the same pages, and placed the copy in front of me. Then she returned the original to her bag. Keep that one. Show it to whoever you want. I looked at the copy but did not touch it. I will. Rachel glanced at Daniel, then back at me. Robert worked his whole life for his family. Daniel should not have to fight for what his father wanted him to have. I stayed quiet. There were several things I could have said. I chose none of them. Rachel mistook that for weakness. She had been doing that a lot lately. What she did not understand was that this argument had not started at my dining room table. It had started 3 weeks earlier on an ordinary Saturday morning, when she came into my kitchen while Daniel was at work. I was pouring coffee when she looked toward the hallway leading to Robert's old office and asked a question she had never asked me before. Maggie, she said, how much is Robert's trust actually worth? 3 weeks before that night at my dining room table, Rachel was standing in my kitchen while I poured coffee. She had stopped by around 10 on a Saturday morning. Daniel was working, so it was just the two of us. At first, everything felt normal. She asked how I was sleeping. She asked whether I needed help with the yard. Then she looked toward the hallway where Robert used to keep his home office and said, Maggie, how much is Robert's trust actually worth? I stopped pouring. Why do you ask? Rachel shrugged. Daniel does not know anything about it. I thought you might. Of course I knew about it. Robert and I had spent years discussing our finances, but that did not mean I wanted to discuss them over coffee with Rachel. It is being handled, I said. She smiled. I know. I am just curious. I carried my cup to the table. Then you should probably talk to Daniel. I did. He says Dad never told him much. She sat across from me. There is the lake property, right? There are several assets. And investments. I looked at her. Rachel. What? You seem very interested all of a sudden. Her smile disappeared for half a second, then came back. I am trying to help Daniel understand what his father left behind. That sounded reasonable. I wanted it to sound reasonable. Robert had been gone 8 months, and grief had changed all of us in different ways. Daniel became quieter. I became more private. Maybe Rachel had simply decided to handle the practical questions Daniel could not bring himself to ask. So I gave her the benefit of the doubt. There are things Daniel may receive according to the trust, I said. That is all I am comfortable discussing right now. She leaned back. May receive. Yes. What does that mean? It means exactly what I said. She stared at me for a moment. Is there some reason Daniel would not receive his inheritance? I did not say that. But you said may. I took a sip of coffee. Rachel, if Daniel has questions, he can ask me. She nodded slowly. Sure. Then she changed the subject. At least I thought she did. 10 minutes later, she asked whether Robert had ever refinanced the lake property. 5 minutes after that, she wanted to know whether the investments were held at a bank or through a brokerage firm. Before she left, she asked whether I had started going through Robert's office. Some of it, I said. You should not do that alone, she told me. Daniel can help. I am fine. There could be important documents in there. That sentence stayed with me after she left. Robert had always been organized. Almost painfully organized. Every tax return had a folder. Every insurance policy had a folder. Every major purchase had a receipt somewhere. About 2 months before he died, he had asked me to sit with him in his office. He handed me a brown leather folder and told me to put it in the fireproof safe in our bedroom closet. Keep this somewhere you can find it, he said. I asked whether I needed to read it then. He told me no. He said everything had already been arranged. I had not opened that folder since. After Rachel left that Saturday, I went upstairs and opened the safe just to make sure it was still there. It was. I touched the edge of the leather, then closed the safe again. I still did not open it. 2 days later, Daniel called me after dinner. Mom, Rachel said you two talked about Dad's trust. I sat down on the couch. She asked me about it. She is just trying to help. That is what she told me. There was a pause. Do you know when everything gets distributed? That was when I realized Rachel's questions had not stayed in my kitchen. Did you want to know that, Daniel, or did Rachel? Does it matter? A little. He sighed. We have been talking about some plans. What plans? Another pause. Nothing definite. I waited. Finally he said, we were thinking that once the inheritance comes through, we might pay off the house. Maybe put some money away for the kids. That sounded like Daniel. Practical. Careful. Then I heard Rachel's voice somewhere behind him. I could not make out every word, but I heard one sentence clearly. Ask her about the lake house. Daniel went quiet. So did I. Then he said, Mom, Rachel also wanted to know what you are planning to do with the lake property. I looked toward Robert's empty chair across the room. Why? I asked. Daniel hesitated. Because she thinks we should sell it. For a second, I thought I had misunderstood him. Sell it? I asked. Daniel lowered his voice. Rachel thinks it makes sense. Does Rachel own the lake property now? Mom, that is not what I said. Then I am asking why she is making plans for it. He sighed. Nobody is making plans. We are just talking. I could still hear Rachel in the background. This time she was not whispering. Tell her it is sitting empty half the year anyway. I closed my eyes. Robert loved that place. It was a modest house on a quiet lake about 90 miles from us, nothing flashy, but he had spent years fixing it up. Daniel learned to fish there. Our grandkids learned to swim off that dock. Rachel had always called it the old lake place. Now suddenly she had opinions about what should happen to it. Daniel, I said, if you want to talk about your father's trust, come over and talk to me yourself. I am talking to you. No. You are repeating things Rachel is saying from across the room. He went silent. Then Rachel's voice came through clearly. Fine. Put me on speaker. Rachel, Daniel said. No, seriously. Put me on speaker. A few seconds later, her voice sounded louder. Maggie, nobody is trying to upset you. We are trying to be practical. About property that you do not control. I never said I controlled it. You are talking about selling it. Because Daniel has an interest in it. According to what? That stopped her for a moment. According to common sense. Robert was his father. That is not a legal document. Her tone changed. Why are you making this so difficult? I am not. Then tell us what Daniel is entitled to. Daniel can receive whatever the trust says he can receive. There you go again, she said. Whatever the trust says. May receive. Can receive. You keep talking like you get to decide. I looked across the room at Robert's chair. I am not discussing private financial documents over speakerphone. Rachel let out a short laugh. Private from your own son. Good night, Rachel. I ended the call before she could answer. The next morning, I woke up to 3 text messages from her. The first said she was sorry the conversation had become tense. The second said she only wanted what was fair for Daniel. The third asked if I could send copies of the trust statements so they could understand the numbers. I did not respond. That afternoon, another message came. Daniel needs to know what is in his inheritance. I wrote back, Daniel can call me. 2 minutes later she replied, we are married. There is no separate Daniel and me when it comes to finances. That was the first time I felt something shift. Until then, Rachel had called it Daniel's inheritance. Over the next few days, that changed. At Sunday dinner she said, when our inheritance is settled, we can finally redo the kitchen. Daniel looked embarrassed. I noticed it immediately. Our inheritance. I asked. Rachel picked up her water glass. You know what I mean. I am not sure I do. Daniel and I are married. What helps him helps our family. I did not argue. 2 days later, she asked me for the account statements again. I said no. The day after that, she asked if Daniel could have a key to the lake house because they wanted to look over our property. I stared at the message for a long time before answering. It is not your property. Rachel called me almost immediately. Why are you being like this? She asked. Like what? Possessive. I am protecting something that does not belong to you. You keep saying that, but Daniel is Robert's son. Yes, he is. Then why are you acting like he is some stranger asking for money? Because being Robert's son does not mean you get to make up your own rules. She went quiet, then said, you know, Maggie, eventually this is going to come out. You cannot keep everything locked away forever. I stayed calm. Goodbye, Rachel. I hung up. That Friday, I drove to the grocery store and ran into Frank near the pharmacy counter. He looked uncomfortable the moment he saw me. After a little small talk, he finally said, Rachel called me yesterday. About what? He hesitated. The lake house. I felt my stomach tighten. What did she tell you? Frank looked around, then lowered his voice. She said you were refusing to let Daniel have access to family property. She asked if I thought Robert would have wanted that. I stood there holding a carton of eggs, realizing Rachel had moved past asking questions. She was building a case, one relative at a time. Frank could tell from my face that I had not heard any of this. I did not say anything to her, he added quickly. I told her she needed to talk to you and Daniel. What exactly did she ask? He shifted the grocery basket in his hand. She wanted to know if Robert ever told me the lake house was supposed to go to Daniel. I stared at him. Did he? No. Did she tell you why she was asking? Frank looked embarrassed. She said she and Daniel were trying to figure out what to do with it. That phrase bothered me all the way home. What to do with it? Like the decision had already been handed to them. The next morning, I called Daniel. He answered on the third ring. "Mom, I am at work." "Then this will be short." "Did Rachel call Uncle Frank about the lake house?" Silence. "Daniel. She might have." "Why?" "She is trying to understand what Dad wanted. By calling relatives." He sighed. "She thinks you are not being clear." "I have been very clear. The trust is being handled." "That is not clear, Mom." I heard frustration in his voice now. "Every time we ask a question, you shut us down. Because Rachel keeps asking questions she has no reason to ask. She is my wife. And you are my son. If you want information, ask me yourself." He paused. "Fine. Do I have a right to the lake house?" "You have whatever rights the trust gives you." He groaned. "There it is again. Because that is the answer." "Mom, this is getting ridiculous." That hurt, but I kept my voice steady. "What is ridiculous is your wife calling family members and acting like a decision has already been made. She is not acting like anything." "Then tell her to stop." He went quiet. "I have to go." He ended the call before I could answer. 2 days later, I learned Rachel had moved past talking to relatives. The property manager at the lake house called me just after lunch. His name was Mark. Robert had known him for years. "Maggie, I wanted to check something with you," he said. "Did you authorize someone named Rachel Collins to discuss the property?" I sat down. "No. That is what I thought." "What did she say?" "She called yesterday asking about the condition of the house, recent repairs, and whether I knew any local real estate agents." My hand tightened around the phone. "Anything else?" "She asked what I thought the place could sell for." I felt cold all over, but I kept my voice even. "Did you give her a number?" "No. I told her I would need to speak with you first." "Thank you, Mark." She said Daniel was handling the inheritance. "He is not handling the property." "Understood." After we hung up, I sat there for a full minute. Then I called Rachel. She answered with a cheerful, "Hi, Maggie. Did you call Mark about selling the lake house?" There was a pause. I called to ask a few questions. "You asked about real estate agents." "Because we need information." "Who is we?" Her tone sharpened. "Daniel and me." "Did Daniel ask you to call him?" Another pause. "Daniel knows I am looking into options." That was not my question. "Why does everything have to be an interrogation with you?" "Because you contacted someone about property you do not control." She laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Robert's property." "Maggie, Robert is dead." I did not answer. She kept going. "I know that sounds harsh, but somebody has to deal with reality. The house is sitting there. It costs money. Taxes, maintenance, insurance. Daniel is an heir. It makes sense to know what it is worth. You are not an heir." The line went quiet. "Excuse me. I said you are not an heir. I am Daniel's wife. That does not make you the owner of anything in Robert's trust." She lowered her voice. "You really think you can just hold everything forever because nobody wants to fight with you? I am not holding anything." "Then prove it. Show us the statements. Show us the trust. Show us what Daniel gets." "No." This time she did not try to hide her anger. "You know what, Maggie? Fine. If you will not handle this privately, maybe we need to talk about it with the family." I looked out the kitchen window toward the empty driveway. "Do what you think you need to do." She gave a short laugh. "I will." The call ended. 10 minutes later, Daniel texted me. "Mom, what did you say to Rachel?" I stared at the screen, then set the phone down. For the first time, I understood this was no longer about curiosity, grief, or even money. Rachel had decided the trust was something standing between her and a future she had already planned, and she was done asking permission. By Sunday afternoon, I understood why Rachel had wanted the whole family there. This was not a conversation anymore. She wanted an audience. Frank and Carol arrived a little before 3. Daniel and Rachel came 10 minutes later, and Rachel walked into my dining room carrying a leather tote bag. She was calm. almost cheerful. That made me more uneasy than if she had arrived angry. We sat around the same table where Robert had spent nearly 40 years eating Sunday dinners, celebrating birthdays, and carving the turkey every Thanksgiving. Rachel waited until everyone was seated, then opened her bag. "I want to clear something up before we start," she said. "Nobody is trying to take anything from Maggie." Frank frowned. "Then why are we here?" Rachel looked at Daniel. He said nothing. "Because Daniel deserves to know what is happening with his father's estate and trust." I folded my hands on the table. "Daniel can ask me anything he wants to ask." Rachel turned toward him. "Go ahead." Daniel looked uncomfortable. "Mom, I just want to understand what I am entitled to." "That is a fair question." Rachel immediately jumped in. "Then show him the statements." I looked at her. I was speaking to Daniel. "I am his wife." "I know." "Then stop treating me like I am some stranger." Carol shifted in her chair. Frank looked down at the table. I could feel Rachel getting more frustrated every time I refused to match her tone. "Daniel and I make financial decisions together," she said. "If he has an inheritance coming, that affects our family. Having an interest in something and controlling it are not necessarily the same thing." Rachel laughed. "There you go again. More careful words. More conditions." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "Rachel, maybe we should just slow down." "No. We have been slowing down for weeks." She looked directly at me. "First you would not tell us what the trust was worth. Then you would not show us the statements. Then you acted like asking about the lake house was somehow inappropriate. Calling the property manager about selling it was inappropriate." Frank's head came up. "She did what?" Rachel turned toward him. "I asked questions. That is all." "You asked about real estate agents," I said. "Because somebody has to think practically. About property you do not control." Rachel's expression hardened. "You keep saying that like it settles everything." "I am saying it because it matters." She leaned forward. "Robert was Daniel's father. Daniel is his son. He should not have to come begging you for information about his own inheritance. He has never had to beg me for anything." "Really? Because from where I am sitting, you are deciding who gets information, who gets access, and what happens to everything Robert left." I stayed quiet. Rachel mistook that silence for an opening. "You were Robert's wife," she said. "Daniel is Robert's blood." The room went still. Carol looked at her in disbelief. Frank slowly leaned back in his chair. Daniel whispered, "Rachel." But she kept going. "I am not trying to be cruel. I am saying there is a difference. Robert spent his life building something for his family. Daniel should not have to wait until you decide he deserves it." I looked at my son. "Is that what you believe?" Daniel hesitated. "I just want this settled." Rachel reached into her tote bag and pulled out several pages. "Good. Then we can settle part of it today." She placed them in front of me and set a pen beside them. I looked down at the first page. It was written to sound official, but I did not recognize the document. "What is this?" "An agreement acknowledging Daniel's rights and confirming that you will not interfere with assets that should pass to him." Frank frowned. "Who wrote that?" "Someone helped us prepare it." "A lawyer?" I asked. Rachel avoided the question. "Someone who understands these things." That answer told me enough. "And you expect me to sign it?" "I expect you to stop making this harder than it needs to be." I picked up the first page, read a few lines, and put it back down. "I am not signing this today." Rachel stared at me. "Why?" "Because I do not sign legal documents without having them reviewed." "Reviewed by who?" "Someone who understands these things." Frank almost smiled at that. Rachel did not. "Fine," she said. "Take a copy. Have whoever you want look at it." She pulled another set from her folder and left it in front of me while putting her original back into the tote bag. "But you cannot delay this forever." I slid the copy away from the pen. "I am not delaying anything." Rachel stood. Daniel remained seated for a few seconds before slowly getting up beside her. At the doorway, she turned back toward me. "Robert would have wanted Daniel protected." I looked at her. I agree. She seemed surprised by my answer. And if you think I was right not to sign anything at that table, subscribe before I tell you what I found after Rachel walked out of my house, because that was when everything changed. After they left, Frank and Carol stayed for a few minutes, but I barely heard what they said. My attention kept returning to the copy Rachel had left on the dining room table. When the house was finally quiet, I picked it up, walked upstairs, and opened the bedroom closet. Behind Robert's old shirts was the fireproof safe. And inside that safe was the brown leather folder he had personally told me to keep. For a few seconds, I just stood there with the safe open. Rachel's agreement was in one hand, and Robert's brown leather folder was in the other. He had given me that folder about 2 months before he died. At the time, I had asked if I needed to read it. He told me everything had already been arranged and that I only needed to keep it somewhere safe. I had trusted him. Now, for the first time, I sat on the edge of our bed and opened it. Inside were copies of financial records, property documents, correspondence, and a thick set of papers related to the trust. Robert's signature appeared more than once. I read slowly, but some of the language was more complicated than I was comfortable interpreting on my own. I saw references to beneficiaries, distributions, trust property, and administrative authority. I did not try to convince myself I understood every word. That was exactly how people made expensive mistakes. I compared a few pages with the agreement Rachel had left on my dining room table. Her document talked about Daniel's inheritance as if his status as Robert's son automatically gave him authority over trust assets. The actual trust documents were much more specific. That was when I stopped reading and started looking for someone who could explain them properly. Near the back of the folder, I found a business card. Thomas Bennett, attorney at law. I knew Thomas. Robert had worked with him for years on estate planning, business matters, and property documents. I had met him several times, but Robert had usually handled those conversations. It was Sunday evening, so I placed the folder and Rachel's agreement on my dresser and waited until morning. I barely slept. At 8:30, I called Thomas's office. His assistant put me through a few minutes later. "Maggie," Thomas said. "It has been a while. How are you doing?" "I have been better." "What happened?" "Rachel brought a document to my house yesterday and asked me to sign it." His voice became more serious. "What kind of document?" "Something about Daniel's inheritance and the trust. She says I am interfering with assets that should pass to him." "Did you sign it?" "No." "Good. Do not." He asked me to explain everything from the beginning. I told him about Rachel asking what the trust was worth, requesting statements, calling the lake house our property, contacting Frank, and then calling Mark about the possible value of the lake house and local real estate agents. Thomas did not interrupt me once. When I finished, he asked, "Do you still have the brown leather folder Robert gave you?" "It is sitting in front of me." "Bring it with you." "When?" "Can you come in at 2 this afternoon?" "Yes." Then he asked something I had not expected. "What is Mark's full name?" I told him. "Do you have his phone number and email address?" "Yes." "Send both to my assistant. I want to speak with him before we meet with Daniel and Rachel." "Why?" "Because if Rachel contacted someone connected to trust property, I want a clear record of exactly what she asked for and what she represented her authority to be." That sentence made the situation feel much more serious. "Thomas, did she do something illegal?" "I am not making that conclusion. I am gathering facts. There is a difference." "All right. And Maggie, do not call Rachel about this. Do not argue with Daniel. Do not send either of them copies of anything from that folder." "Why not?" "Because we are going to deal with the documents, not assumptions." I sent Mark's contact information to Thomas's assistant and drove to his office that afternoon with the brown folder and the copy Rachel had left behind. Thomas spent nearly an hour reviewing everything. He read Rachel's agreement first, then compared it with Robert's trust documents. Several times he stopped to make notes. I wanted to ask what he was seeing, but I waited. Finally, he set his pen down. "Rachel's document does not give her or Daniel authority over this trust." I felt my shoulders relax. "Then what does it do?" It tries to get you to acknowledge rights and control that the actual trust does not grant in the way she is claiming. Daniel does have rights, though. Yes. He does. And that distinction is important. Thomas opened Robert's trust agreement and turned several pages. Daniel is a beneficiary. But being a beneficiary and having authority to manage trust assets are two very different things. I looked at the document. Who has the authority? Thomas closed the folder before answering. I want Daniel and Rachel sitting here when we go through that. Why? Because after what happened at your house, nobody should be able to say they misunderstood what Robert put in writing. He picked up his phone. I am going to ask them to come in tomorrow morning. Before he made the call, he looked at me again. One more thing. I spoke with Mark. I sat straighter. What did he say? Enough that I asked him to send me copies of his communications with Rachel. Did he? He is sending them today. Thomas rested his hand on the brown folder. Tomorrow, Rachel is going to hear exactly what this trust allows, exactly what it does not allow, and exactly who Robert gave the authority to manage it. The next morning, I arrived at Thomas's office about 10 minutes early. The brown leather folder was already on the conference table, along with a certified copy of Robert's trust agreement and several printed pages Mark had sent over the night before. I recognized Rachel's name on one of them, but I did not read further. Thomas had asked me to let him handle the meeting, and I agreed. Daniel and Rachel arrived together a few minutes later. Rachel carried the same leather tote bag she had brought to my house. She looked confident. Daniel looked tired. Morning, Maggie, Rachel said. Morning. Thomas invited us to sit down. Rachel barely waited for him to take his seat. I hope we can finally clear this up today. That is exactly what we are going to do, Thomas said. She placed her hands on the table. Daniel is Robert's beneficiary. I assume we can at least agree on that. Yes, Thomas said. Rachel looked at me. A small smile appeared on her face. Then I do not understand why this has become so difficult. Thomas opened the certified trust agreement. Because being a beneficiary does not mean what you appear to think it means. Her smile faded. Daniel is entitled to his inheritance. Daniel has beneficiary rights under the terms of this trust. That is correct. Then we are done. Thomas shook his head. No. We are just getting started. Daniel looked from Rachel to Thomas. Can you explain that? Of course. A beneficiary may receive money, property, information, or other benefits according to the terms of a trust. A trustee is the person legally responsible for administering that trust. The trustee manages trust assets, follows the written instructions, handles authorized distributions, and owes a fiduciary duty to the beneficiaries. Rachel leaned forward. Daniel is Robert's son. That is a family relationship, Thomas said. It does not automatically make him the trustee. What about the lake house, she asked. Thomas turned to another document. That property is titled in the name of the trust. It is a trust asset. Rachel glanced at Daniel. So Daniel has an interest in it. As a beneficiary, he has whatever beneficial interest Robert's trust gives him. He does not have authority to sell it, list it, transfer it, or direct someone else to do those things merely because he is a beneficiary. Daniel frowned. Then who does? Thomas turned several pages and placed the certified trust agreement between us. When Robert created this trust, he named himself as the original trustee. He also specified exactly what would happen when he could no longer serve. Rachel was completely still now. Thomas pointed to a section on the page. This is the successor trustee provision. Daniel leaned closer. Who did Dad name? Thomas looked directly at him. Your mother. Rachel blinked. Maggie. Margaret Collins, Thomas said. And the document names her as sole trustee. For several seconds, nobody spoke. I did not smile. I did not need to. Rachel pulled the document closer and stared at the section Thomas had indicated. That cannot mean she has complete control. It means she has trustee authority, Thomas replied. There are limits. She must follow the trust. She has a fiduciary duty. She cannot simply take trust property for herself or ignore Daniel's beneficiary rights. But she is the sole trustee Robert selected to administer these assets. Daniel looked at me. Did you know? I knew your father had arranged the trust carefully. Thomas explained the legal details to me yesterday. Rachel looked back at Thomas. Robert would never have wanted Daniel excluded. He is not excluded. Then why does Maggie control everything? Because Robert separated beneficial rights from management authority. That is common in trust planning. Rachel pushed the document away. So Daniel cannot make any decisions. Not decisions reserved to the trustee. And I cannot. Thomas paused for only a second. You are not a trustee or a beneficiary under this trust. You have no management authority over its assets. Rachel's face changed. I am Daniel's wife. That does not alter the trust document. Daniel rubbed his forehead. So Rachel calling Mark about selling the lake house. Thomas reached for the printed pages. That is the next issue. He placed them on the table one at a time. Mark provided copies of the communications he received. These show questions about the property's condition, repairs, possible market value, and local real estate representation. Rachel looked at the pages. I was gathering information. You are free to ask general questions, Thomas said. But you cannot represent yourself as someone authorized to act for the trust. I never said I was the trustee. Thomas looked down at one of the printed messages. You told Mark that Daniel was handling his father's inheritance and that you were helping him explore options for the property. Daniel turned toward her. You told him I was handling the inheritance. Rachel looked at him. That is not what I meant. But that is what you said. Thomas kept his voice calm. Nothing has been transferred, and Mark did not treat your inquiry as authorization to sell. But from this point forward, there should be no confusion. The lake house belongs to the trust. Daniel is a beneficiary. Rachel has no management authority. And Margaret is the sole trustee. Rachel stared at the certified document again. For weeks, she had kept asking me to prove why she could not make decisions about Robert's trust. Now the proof was sitting directly in front of her, with Robert's signature on it. Rachel kept staring at the printed messages Mark had sent Thomas. A few minutes earlier, she had walked into that conference room expecting answers from me. Now she was the one being asked to explain herself. I made one phone call, she said. Thomas looked down at the pages. You asked Mark about the condition of the lake house, recent repairs, its possible market value, and local real estate agents. I was gathering information about an asset held by a trust you do not manage. Rachel looked at Daniel. Are you seriously going to sit there and let them make this sound worse than it was? Daniel did not answer right away. Thomas remained calm. Nobody is accusing you of a crime, Rachel. I am explaining the limits of your authority. You have no management authority under this trust. I was trying to help my husband. That does not change the trust agreement. Rachel pushed the printed messages away from her. Daniel is still entitled to his inheritance. Yes, Thomas said. She stopped. I could tell she had expected him to disagree. Then what exactly is the problem? There is no problem with Daniel exercising his beneficiary rights. The problem is confusing those rights with the authority to control trust assets. Daniel leaned forward. So what can I actually do? Thomas turned toward him. You are entitled to whatever information, benefits, and distributions Robert provided for you under the trust. You may ask appropriate questions about its administration. But you are not the trustee. Can I sell the lake house? No. Daniel glanced at Rachel. Can she? No. Rachel folded her arms. Can Maggie? As sole trustee, your mother has authority to manage trust assets according to the written terms of the trust and her fiduciary duty. She cannot ignore the trust. She cannot simply take assets for herself. But management authority belongs to her. Rachel looked directly at me. So you knew this the whole time. I knew Robert had arranged things carefully. I did not understand every legal detail until Thomas explained it. You could have told me. I asked you to stop. That is not the same thing. Would you have listened? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Daniel looked at the certified trust agreement again. Why would Dad set it up this way? Thomas answered carefully. I cannot disclose every private conversation I had with your father. What I can tell you is what he put in writing. He wanted one trustee administering the assets under specific instructions. Rachel shook her head. Robert would never have done this. I finally spoke. He did. She turned toward me. Daniel is his son. I know. Then why would he give you the authority? For weeks, I had listened to her call Daniel's inheritance our inheritance. I had watched her contact Frank, call Mark, and make plans for a lake house she did not control. Then she had brought an agreement into my home and expected me to sign it. Maybe this is why, I said. Rachel stared at me. What is that supposed to mean? You started making decisions before you knew whether you had the right to make them. I was protecting Daniel. From what? She said nothing. From me. I asked. From his mother. From being shut out. Daniel was never shut out. You decided that not being in control meant being shut out. Thomas gathered the printed messages into a neat stack. Going forward, any questions about trust administration should come through the proper channels. Rachel, you should not contact property managers, brokers, financial institutions, or anyone connected to trust assets as though you have authority to act for the trust. Rachel looked at him. So I am supposed to do nothing. You are supposed to stop acting on behalf of a trust you do not manage. Daniel turned toward her. Did you contact anyone besides Mark? Rachel looked away. Why does that matter? Because I am asking you. Daniel, do not do this. Do what? Ask you a question. She was quiet. Daniel's voice stayed calm. Did you contact anyone else about the lake house? Rachel looked at Thomas, then at me, and finally back at her husband. I talked to one real estate agent. Daniel stared at her. You what? I did not list the house. I just asked questions. You never told me that. Because nothing happened. You told me you only called Mark. I was trying to get an idea of what the property might be worth. Thomas pulled a legal pad closer. What was the agent's name? Rachel hesitated. Why? Because I need to determine exactly what was discussed and make sure there was no representation that you or Daniel had authority to sell trust property. Rachel's confidence was gone now. I never signed anything. That is good, Thomas said. Now I need the agent's name. For the first time since this began, Daniel was no longer looking at me for answers. He was looking at Rachel. Rachel finally gave Thomas the name of the real estate agent. He wrote it down and asked whether she had signed anything, authorized photographs, requested a listing agreement, or represented herself as the trustee. She said no to all four. Thomas told her he would confirm that directly, and Rachel did not argue. That told me more than anything else had. Daniel sat back in his chair and stared at the table. You should have told me, he said. Rachel looked at him. I was trying to help us. You were making plans with something that was never ours to control. It could still benefit us. Daniel shook his head. That is not the point. I had waited weeks to hear him say those words. I did not feel victorious. I felt tired. Thomas closed the trust agreement. Here is what happens now. Margaret continues administering the trust as sole trustee. Daniel retains every beneficiary right Robert gave him. Nothing is being taken away from him. But no trust asset will be sold, transferred, or managed based on instructions from anyone who lacks authority. Rachel looked at me. So what are you going to do? Keep the lake house forever just to prove you can? No. Then what? I am going to do what Robert asked me to do. She laughed quietly. That is convenient. Rachel, Daniel said. Stop. She looked at him in surprise. He had barely challenged her through any of this. No, she said. I want to know. We have spent weeks trying to get answers. You spent weeks trying to get control, Daniel replied. That is different. Rachel's eyes moved from him to me. You really believe her over your own wife? Daniel took a moment before answering. I believe the document sitting in front of me. Nobody had anything to say after that. Thomas told us he would contact Mark and the real estate agent, document what had happened, and make sure everyone involved understood that only the trustee could act for the trust. He also told Daniel he could receive the information Robert's trust entitled him to receive through the proper process. Daniel nodded. Rachel did not. When we left the office, Daniel asked if he could speak to me alone. Rachel walked toward their car without saying goodbye. Daniel stood beside me on the sidewalk. "Mom, I am sorry." I looked at him. "For what part?" He swallowed. "For letting this get this far." I appreciated that he did not make excuses. "I should have come to you myself," he said. "Yes." I kept telling myself Rachel was just being practical. "I know. And I thought you were avoiding me. I was protecting something your father trusted me to protect. That includes your rights too, Daniel." He looked down. "I understand that now." Over the next few weeks, Thomas confirmed that Rachel had spoken with the agent but had never been in a legal position to list the property. No sale had been authorized. Nothing had been transferred. Mark was instructed to direct all future questions about the lake house to me or Thomas. I kept the property exactly where it was while I reviewed the trust carefully with Thomas. I did not cut Daniel off. I did not try to punish him for his wife's behavior. Robert had left instructions, and I followed them. Daniel received the information and benefits he was entitled to under those instructions. The difference was that everything happened through the trust instead of through Rachel's plans. She stopped calling me about statements. She stopped saying our inheritance. She never asked Mark another question. Things between us were not warm after that, but they were clear. And sometimes clear boundaries are more valuable than fake peace. A few months later, Daniel came with me to the lake house. We sat on the dock where Robert used to drink his morning coffee. Daniel looked across the water and said, "Dad really thought all of this through, did he not?" He did. I wish I had asked him more questions while he was here. So do I. That was all we needed to say. Rachel had thought the trust was about money. For a while, Daniel had too. I learned that it was really about responsibility. Robert did not leave me authority so I could punish our family. He left it to me so somebody would protect what he had built when emotions, assumptions, and money started pulling people in different directions. If you were sitting at that table, I would genuinely like to know what you would have done in my place. Would you have shown Rachel the trust earlier, or would you have waited for the attorney too? Leave your opinion in the comments, and if this story made you think differently about family and inheritance, a like would mean a lot. Because money can reveal what people want, but boundaries reveal what they are willing to respect.